Hey guys, welcome back to the Ramble. I am your host, Maria Legier, and I haven't slept tonight. Please forgive my voice. This is Times Are Tough, Part 5. Times could have been better, gentlemen. I ain't gonna lie. With a slight fear of sounding as though I have just emerged from the biannual meeting of the tinfoil hat enthusiasts, I believe we are witnessing the end results of an ideological takeover. Propaganda is everywhere, to those with eyes willing to see. That is, eyes that are no longer blinded to what is, quite obviously, ideological propaganda, so commonplace that it is barely noticed, so ingrained in society that it is taken for granted. This constant stream of misandric nonsense, the constant male-bashing going on, is normalized to such a degree that it is not only accepted, but it is celebrated. Substitute male with any other identity group, and it would be called out for being bigoted and hateful, because it, quite rightly, is. When the eyes open, the eyes are opened, the eyes have it. For pointing it out, the labels come flying, a mad torrential downpour of piss and shit. The labels and various sordid accusations. And the ridicule. Oh goodness, the ridicule and the shaming and the ostracizing, the banning, the sacred cancelling. In my pre-rambling about this stuff days, I was wholeheartedly unaware that I was abusing my wife. Post-rambling about this stuff, I learned that I was an abuser of my wife. I mean, I was well aware that I was oppressing her with the full fury of my male privilege and singular malignant masculine capacity for oppression. And this I had been told on several occasions, especially in art school, by the teachers there. As stated thousands of times, repetition becomes a necessity when people simply refuse to listen. And I will repeat this until the world ends if need be. Besides, I can't quite get it out of my head for reasons of this behavior being severely fucked up. So fucked in the head, in fact, that the skulls of these teachers must look like a well-worn fleshlight. And this behavior from the teachers of the school was deemed by one of those so-called real feminists to not be the product of feminist thought, but a product of them being artists. So there you have it, gentlemen. Accusatory feminist rhetoric of male oppression of women is not the result of accusatory feminist rhetoric of male oppression of women, but of an occupation as an artist. It was the artist speaking, not the feminist. Obviously, and obliviously. One assumes that this fact, that the teachers of a school decided to try and break up a romantic relationship for reasons of feminism, I'm not joking, this actually happened, became too harsh a trespass on the private lives of someone to those who decided to follow an ideology which has made it their purpose to make it so that the personal must be political, and so it could not possibly be the fault of hallowed and flawless feminism that feminism was used as an excuse to implement feminist thought and dogma in the private lives of someone. One could almost believe that people just have this knee-jerk reaction wherein feminism must be defended, no matter how ridiculous the defense, no matter the mental gymnastics one must employ in order to defend it. When reaching so far as to blame an occupation as an artist rather than feminism for spewing feminist stuff, one has been wholly and succinctly brainwashed. There cannot possibly be anything wrong with feminism. Everything, anything other than feminism must be blamed, no matter how ridiculous. You know, when studying art, one must be aware that one's personal romantic relationship is under constant scrutiny from the teachers therein. The art plays second fiddle to one's romantic or platonic relationships, and this is to be expected apparently. And not only that, it is to be accepted and it is to be celebrated. For these feminists were only trying to save my poor huddled wife, tried helping her to escape my gruesome clutching clutches. Mean patriarchal tyrant I so obviously am, so obviously was. And the reasoning was that she was not social enough. She is just about as introverted as myself, maybe even more. No matter, her introversion, that is her not being social enough for the likes of these teachers, was considered to be my fault for forcing her to not be social and expand her circle of friends to include the entirety of the school. Women, to the eyes of feminism, have neither free will nor agency. All their actions, or lack thereof, must be caused by some man in their lives, not they themselves, unless they do as feminism dictates. Then it is the actions, or lack thereof, of the woman, not some external force. Honk, honk. Anyhow, that I was abusing my wife was indeed news to me. Oh well. That's just the way of things. I am an oppressor and an abuser, according to dim-witted troglodytes who wouldn't know a grain of sand from a pile of shit. It is clear and it is obvious that these types of people know both me and my wife better than we know ourselves, or each other. It appears to me that the line between simply oppressing one's partner on account of being born male and abusing her on account of the same depends on whether or not one is critical of feminism. It follows from feminist dogma that one is either an oppressor or an abuser if male and engaged in a heterosexual relationship. The most important part, no matter merely oppressor or horrid abuser, is to check one's privilege. That is the first step on the path towards redemption and eventual enlightenment. Do that, and the oppression one bestows upon one's partner is not as bad as if one did not acknowledge one's privilege and move forwards on the path towards limited redemption and partial absolution. The second step is to do whatever the hell one's female partner demands. If not bending the knee and bending over backwards to fulfill her every wish, one is engaged in oppression of the fairer sex. And the world will see no qualms in reminding one about this time and again. Aye, it is the tried and true tactic of the propagandists and the shame peddlers. The third step is for the female in the relationship to bend the knee to feminism, and so leaving her will, her individuality, and her own wishes in life behind for the great glory of the hallowed serpent cult that is feminism. Horrid misogynist though I am, vile and depraved abuser of one woman in particular, as well as of women in general though I be, I have, as of yet, not been referred to as an incel. And this surprises me quite a bit, though I suppose it is just a matter of time before this married man with a baby on the way is labelled in just such a way. An incel is no longer someone who is involuntarily celibate. Rather, it has become anyone who dares oppose the forces of feminism, as well as referring to anyone who attempts to shine a light on the issues predominantly affecting men. I have witnessed married men with multiple children be referred to as an incel by the hive of the perpetually scorned for daring to oppose the hive mind. On Twitter, of course, and as expected. And that is where the madness truly lives and lies, to fester and to spread. And this, then, is proof to my eyes that those who throw these labels, these insults and this attempted shame and ridicule around know nothing about what they actually mean. They just heard it somewhere, and picked it up, because these labels and that word and this particular term is in vogue at the moment. One of those trendy buzzwords they heard somewhere and so apply to any situation, whether fitting or not. Back in my art school days, the word of the hour was emo, as that particular thing was trendy at that particular time and place, and so any work of art which the teachers disliked for any reason was dubbed emo, no matter if it really was emo or not. Such is the way of things and the swing of the buzzwords. When no longer trendy, or when no longer functioning as the intended insult, it will change and something new will take its place. And that is just how she goes, the vile and wicked mistress of trends and passing fancies. The most fitting insult is the most popular buzzword at the moment. When a certain insult no longer functions as intended, when it is broken down and rendered useless due to its overuse, something new will take its place. For the lack of argumentative ability, the lack of reasoned arguments demands insults, demands ad hominem attacks made so that the person being insulted no longer defends his position, but rather is forced to defend his character from vicious attacks and smears. The only thing that does not change is the accusations of hating women. Nothing is worse in this culture of ours, wherein this hatred of women is so omnipresent, than hating women. Nothing is more frowned upon. Waking up to this, one comes to realize that those who hold the strongest opinions, who see no qualms in screaming and roaring and raging and carrying on about their superior moral stance, have no leg to stand on when challenged. That they have, in fact, not delved particularly deeply into that which they profess to care oh so much about. It just feels right, and so it must be right. Besides, everyone else is doing it, and so it must be doubly right and proper, true and correct. If challenged, feelings get hurt, and so character assassinations fly and leap and bounce like horny porn stars at the peak of a cocaine binge. Sweat, spit, and various other bodily fluids dripping and secreting from greasy skin and parted lips. As do the insults and the labels and assorted accusations about this and about that. When this happens, the insult wielders and shame peddlers lose all ability to listen and to read. My favourite of the ones I have received was the claim that my opposition to feminism could not possibly mean anything but me wanting to chain my wife to the kitchen, for her to cook dinner and birth babies and do nothing but that. And this I also mentioned time and again. And the reason for me repeating this all the bloody time is of course that it is so damned outlandish, so far removed from my behaviour and my beliefs that it becomes absolutely goddamned motherfucking ridiculous. I also find it quite telling that, in order to shame men when men ain't supporting feminism, the feminist hordes see no problems with accusing him of mistreating his spouse. Almost makes one believe that the feminist hive mind are full aware of men's desires to protect women, so that they know claiming him being abusive towards his partner will make him feel ashamed and angry. And in a society in which women are hated ever so much, for men who mistreat their partners based on this horrid misogyny so omnipresent as to be invisible, one should believe that accusations of mistreatment of their partners would not function as a point of attempted shame and browbeating. How very strange, then, that it functions as intended more often than not. These people hear what they want to hear, read what they want to read. It does not matter that something is neither spoken nor written. The bumbling, raging fool sat or stood in front of one will claim the ability to read one's mind and so pretend that what one said is not what one meant, but that one meant that which the offended believes that one meant, that one said what the offended imagined that one said. The offended is, after all, the offended, and the word of the offended is truth. That nothing of what the offended is offended about is said or meant matters little. The offended believe that this is what the offender meant, and so this is what the offender meant. Otherwise, the offended would have proven themselves a fool. And we can't have that. The offended is never wrong. One must never apologize to these people. The morally righteous have no problems with acting immorally, see no qualms in doing exactly that which they demand others do not. The tolerant sure as hell do not tolerate much but themselves and their own views, for they are elevated above the rules of conduct which they apply to others. The others, you see, are labelled such as this and are therefore effectively othered, meaning that they deserve neither protection nor proper treatment. How very tolerant of other people and their opinions. We can't tolerate hatred and hate speech, they shriek, whilst plunging themselves headfirst into the deep and cold waters of searing hatred, spreading hatred and mockery wherever they go, arguing with personal attacks and character assassinations all the while. For all is fair in love and in war, and these vicious beasts are engaged in war. It is a very one-sided war, all things considered, but that does not matter. What matters is that these people are so blinded by their hubris and their swollen sense of moral superiority that anyone not subscribing to their way of thinking or to their view of the world are immoral barbarians, barely human, deserving neither basic respect nor proper treatment. In fact, they view the others as human scum. As such, the others deserve whatever comes their way of shame and ridicule, harassment and doxing and, at worst, violence and murder. The others are not people to the eyes and mind of the hive. Death and illness amongst the out-group is celebrated amongst the in-group. It sickens me, but that is how it has come to be. The others have been effectively dehumanized by a clique that has been effective in dehumanizing their opponents, painting them as anything but human, all that is opposed to themselves. Dehumanizing anyone is a terrifying thing. There are no limits to what one can do to someone when that someone is effectively dehumanized. History is riddled with examples of this, of dehumanizing of one individual for the purpose of torture and murder, or of entire groups of people for the purpose of the same. Nothing ever changes, gentlemen, only the circumstances, the in-group and the out-group, the accepted enemy and the accepted heroes, the accepted theories and that which is to be believed on nothing but blind faith. And this brings the empathy gap into play once more. It shows it for all the world to see, yet the world refuses to see it, have been forced to not see it, have been tricked into not seeing it. Most likely due to the very limited reach of my blog and channels, as well as my refusal to take part in online discussion with the hive mind, I receive little in way of shame and ridicule. Rather surprising, given the acrid tone and acidic honesty in my rants, rambles, ravings and writings. And there has been some, as one would expect, though mostly I have received very pleasant emails and comments from people who, to my surprise, enjoy this thing that I do. And those I have received, as well as those who have sent them my way, are very much appreciated. If nothing else, this gives me an opportunity to extend a heartfelt thank you. And that can't be all bad for sure. It does, in truth and in fact, make it worth it. And for those who comment on YouTube, by the way, and now that I'm on the topic, I try to the best of my abilities to reply, but the comments seem to be deleted with neither warning nor sense. On the rare occasion that I am actually notified about a comment, this is not often, they tend to be removed by the magic of the algorithm the moment I am on my way to reply. This is a sad state of affairs, but that is how it is. Go follow the blog or head on over to the BitChute channel instead would be my solution to this. YouTube decided to try for assisted suicide. And I am not one to deny someone who has been suffering for a long time the right to die in peace, with what little dignity they have left. Euthanasia is the humane option. It has suffered enough, poor beast. In regards to the attempted shaming and the ridicule, the best attempt must have been that one person who referred to me as a MGTOW, and this is also one of those fancy new labels that are easily and hastily thrown about by people who do not know what it entails. Now, I do understand why I would be referred to as a MGTOW, despite never declaring myself one. I mean, I do ramble quite a bit about the importance of solitude, about checking out of society, about, in essence, going one's own way and doing one's own thing. There is no denying that I am influenced in no small way by the MGTOW philosophy, if I may be so bold as to simplify it by referring to it as a philosophy. Yet, I would rather not wear that label, just as I would rather not be burdened with an overabundance of labels at all. The labels put upon me are, for the most part, placed there by other people, all for the express purpose of shame and of ridicule. And to be fair, I may very well be considered a MGTOW in a way. In other ways I could not. I am married, for example, and that seems to throw a spanner in the works, according to some, if not most, of those who subscribe to MGTOW ideals. Now, whether this label of MGTOW fits me or not is not the point. The point is that labels are thrown around so hastily, so angrily, and so nonsensically that the words eventually lose whatever impact and meaning they could have had. The point is that labels and accusations of this or of that is thrown around hastily and willy-nilly as an attack on the person making an argument, not the argument itself. The point is that public debate is driven by emotions, not by facts, by rationality, not rationality, by attacking the person rather than the argument. And it is terrifying to see supposed adults throw temper tantrums like spoiled toddlers because someone merely voices a different opinion. It is not a mark of tolerance to label someone an abuser and an oppressor of their partner, such as I have been labelled, merely for opposition to an ideology. Quite the contrary, I dare say. It is the mark of intolerance, of a mind shut down, locked down instead of being open, despite claims to the opposite. Those who propose to be extraordinarily open-minded are the most judgmental and close-minded bastards out there. Being tolerant means tolerating that other people hold other views. It does not mean shutting down people with differing views. It does not mean censorship. It does not mean cancelling someone for their opinions. This is quite contrary to tolerance. Try opposing mass migration over here in Europe without being labelled a racist, to name but one example. It is impossible. The arguments proposed does not matter. They are not listened to. One is dubbed a racist, a xenophobe, an Islamophobe, or a Nazi depending on the whim of the label wielder. And these labels are thrown about with careless abandon, alongside all those other fine and dandy labels that simply have no meaning anymore. Seldom, if ever, is the case discussed, the arguments responded to. The immediate knee-jerk reaction is to scream, "Racist!" and be done with it. A racist is subhuman, and so deserves nothing but scorn. It does not matter that one is not a racist, merely that one is labelled as one. Replace racist with any other ist currently disliked by society at large. Replace mass immigration with any other fairly popular issue of the day, with any other cause célèbre. It still functions the same way, as is the case with feminism. Opposing feminism cannot possibly mean anything but that one is a hater of, an oppressor of, and an abuser of women, which is, as stated previously, highly frowned upon in this society of ours where women are hated ever so much. The fact that these accusations function as intended, that they function as the mark of shame that they are supposed to function as, making it so that people shun the person accused, mock and ridicule and otherwise engage in personal attacks of the person accused, that these accusations may very well be enough to make a person lose their job and their income, ought to be proof proper that society, in particular Western society, is not inherently hateful of women nor inherently racist. Particularly not when following the Newspeak definition of racism, in which it is decided that white people cannot experience racism due to the colour of their skin rendering them immune. Which sounds rather racist to me, but I am not allowed to speak on the topic for reasons of my sex and skin colour. To me, it seems to be quite the contrary where sexematisms and racism is concerned. That these accusations alone are enough to damage a person's career and personal life ought to function as proof to the opposite of what these supposed moral superiors claim. The ones who claim to fight the establishment are the establishment. The ideological takeover is damn near complete. What little opposition remains is dealt with swiftly and effectively through public trials on social media, through laughingstocks and virtual lynch mobs now seemingly pouring out onto the streets, moving from the internet to real life. One's character is assassinated by smears and made to crawl on down the path of shame, scorned and shunned and mocked and ridiculed and shamed by a society supposedly functioning the other way around. It is a strange and confusing time to be alive, when it is not rage-inducing, that is. And it is not particularly tempting to take part in a society in which one has become the enemy by popular demand and popular vote by virtue of nothing but one's sex and gender. Feminism started a gender war. Intersectionality tossed race and ethnicity and sexuality and disabilities and whatever else into the mix like so many sprinkles of shit on the ice cream. A war must necessarily contain at least two groups, as well as contain at least one enemy. Men, it was decided, is the enemy. Veiling it behind the nebulous and omnipresent patriarchy matters little, when that which is behind the veil is so obviously men. Trickling all the way from the declarations of sentiments back in the good old days of terrible oppression of the poor whammons, flowing like a river of shit through all the incarnations of feminism, the red line that sparkles and shines all ruby red and gooey. Men are the enemy of women, the oppressors and abusers and so and such of women. The goodness, the kindness, the decency of men, all the good qualities of men forgotten and neglected, or presented as belonging to a few men, not to the majority of men, the shadow side of men and of masculinity being amplified and presented to be the normal and not the abnormal. Why should one wish to take part in this society? Why should one, as a man with self-respect, feed into this machine? Why should one wish to grease the wheels of the thundering, steaming, pounding machine with one's own blood, when all that one is met with is contempt? When all that one is told is that it is never good enough, no matter what? What's in it for men in the long run, when society shows quite clearly that it is not only willing to turn its collectivized and jiggling, fleshy, bulbous backside on us, but to throw us under the bus whilst expecting us to be grateful for the possibility to be run over by the bus? There's not much there, if one is to hang on to one's self-respect and one's values as a man. The empathy gap is omnipresent, the lack of compassion for boys and for men omnipotent, made remarkably evident by one thing alone, if not a whole host of other things. The mass triggering of just about all of society when one is wicked and mean enough to go against the holy tenets of feminism, to go against the accepted narrative and the grain, and so declare that men and boys have their own issues that need to be addressed on men's own terms. But this completely innocent and reasonable stance is enough to get people pissed off in no small way should be decent enough proof that there is an empathy gap. Yet, it is as it always is. Society is blind to this, just as it is blind to all the other struggles and sufferings of boys and of men. And so, boys and men need to become tough, need to become hard and become strong. In order to become tough and become hard and become strong, I propose that boys and men become soft. Soft like water is soft, and water is sure as heckled hell not as soft as all that. And that was this part done. Join me later on for the next installment in this rambling diatribe filled with soggy knees and other such naughty things. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this ramble more than my previous ramblings. Please check out the links down below should you wish to stalk me on social media or support the blog channels and my caffeine independence. And I'll catch you next time. Please like, share and subscribe. This is Muriel Shier, signing off.